Ho ho ho. Merry Christmas. Holy shit. What the? Could you contact center and declare an emergency and ask for the nearest airport vectors? Of course, sir. Hehehe. Stop. What are you doing? No, the plane! I don't know how to fleur. Flying a plane is a little hard. So if you asked me if I would have fathomed flying in a simulator a year ago, I would have said, how did you get in my house? But I would have also said no, as well as how did you get in my house? But this all changed for me when I discovered a show called Mayday Air Disasters, and so after I fell down a rabbit hole of content involving planes, I decided I wanted to do one singular flight on an online network called VATSIM. VATSIM, in short, is a place where people who aren't pilots can pretend to be pilots, and talk to people who aren't air traffic controllers pretending to be air traffic controllers. Except I'm pretty sure you get banned if you show up on the network not knowing how anything works. So at this point you might be asking, well, where did you start learning? And if I'm being honest, I didn't really start playing the sim to practice for VATSIM at all. I was just playing around and messing with the only 4 airliners in the sim. It was actually only after I mortgaged my house that I decided, you know what, let's try this. Note, learning this game is not the same as actually training to be a pilot. Please, for the love of God, don't try flying a plane without a proper license. Since I had been playing the sim for a little bit before deciding this, I had an easier time picking out the plane I wanted to fly. And that plane is known as the Airbus A320neo. Also, I'm pretty sure I don't want to pick... You know, my lawyers have advised me not to make this joke for fear of being found dead in a Kroger parking lot. After I had selected the plane, I really had no direction of where to go next, so I just looked up a video on how to do a full flight in the flight simulator. It was a start, but the videos in question didn't go over every detail of the plane, which you kind of need to know in order to fly realistically, but past me didn't know this, so he just went on practicing using these videos. However, I did learn a few important things from these videos, like the phases of flight. Pre-flight, you make sure the plane works. Taxi, you move it. Takeoff. Climb, you go up. Cruise, just sitting, making sure the plane is working. Descent, you go down towards your landing runway. Approach, you do your final preparations for landing, like setting up the things that'll help stop once landed. And finally, landing. I couldn't think of anything funny for this one. There's also the FMC, which in short codes the autopilot to actually work. It takes in information like your route and wind, so it can automatically adjust the aircraft for a comfortable ride, as well as, you know, following the route. I also made the discovery that this site called SimBrief could create a flight plan with a route. However, past this stuff, there was a very limited understanding of what I was actually going to need to do during a real VATSIM flight. For example, when do I descend? When do I deploy flaps? When do you start to slow down? Will my dad come back with the milk? But I was going to realize very shortly that there was much more than just these small questions. After watching these full flight videos for a while, I realized that I was bored and needed something new. So I decided to actually start watching VATSIM flights. I was gonna watch these flights and start noting all the things they did because, hey, I might as well start picking up on when people do certain tasks and how to communicate with ATC. But my God, there was so much I didn't know. Look at this. Yeah, there was a lot I didn't know, and I knew that now. Whatever I had been doing before clearly wasn't even close to what I needed. But I then proceeded to do nothing about it, and continue doing what I was doing anyways because I'll eventually do it. Once I master my plane, I just gotta keep practicing and I'll eventually get there. Just keep the steady pace I have going and it'll be fine.
6 months later.
Well, I, for some reason, didn't touch the simulator for half a year, either out of fear of the things I knew I had to learn or something else. But I had essentially forgotten every part of how to do a proper flight, and in my infinite wisdom, I decided that one singular video of a tutorial flight would kickstart my brain on what to do and when to do things, and that would be enough to pick up where I left off. Because I had muscle memory at least, right? Quite cool. Why am I lifting into the air? What's happening? On my flight controls, I pressed the button to turn on the taxi lights, and it killed the plane. So, it is now time to reverse. Oh, what the? Oh gosh, wait, hold on, why won't I turn? Never do that again. Yeah, I know. What's it yelling at me about? Oh, am I not going fast enough for this? Too fast. Oh, there's no way I'm landing right there. Crap. This ain't good. But in retrospect, it actually isn't as bad as it seems. This one event made me rethink how I was going about all of this, and essentially made me decide to restart all of my learning from the ground up. So, if you were paying attention, you might have realized that I suck at stepping out of my comfort zone, but also, the plane I was using in that last event wasn't the stock A320neo I had been using. No, my dear viewer, this is an A320neo produced by a dev group called Fly-by-Wire, and the plane actually has most of its buttons and systems working, something the previous A320 didn't have. And this is the new plane I was going to base everything off of, especially because it came with its own manual made by the Fly-by-Wire devs themselves. So, with a new inspiration ignited, I started studying. And through this, I actually cleared up most of the questions I had. So, let's do this again. Pre-flight. Now here's where to get the aircraft set up with things like takeoff speeds, boarding the passengers, and code the whole flight management computer, which is easier now because you can actually import your Simbri flight plan into it. Taxi. You follow painted lines, each of which have a specified letter attached to them, that guide you towards your runway. Takeoff. Use the aforementioned takeoff speeds to accelerate down the runway using one of two different thrust settings, toga and flex to temp. The standard in real life is typically the latter. Climb. You ascend to your cruise altitude via something called your standard instrument departure, which is a route that safely guides you away from the airport and has altitude and speed restrictions you must adhere to. Cruise. Welcome aboard Medini Airways. Sit back, relax, enjoy our in-flight food, maybe chat with the person to your right. Have a drink from our in-flight bar. Enjoy the seizure-inducing child we aren't gonna do anything about, and enjoy the mid-air campfire on the right wing. Descent. Once you reach your top of descent, you'll descend down towards the runway following your STAR, or Standard Terminal Arrival, that also has restrictions you must follow. Approach. You pass something called the decel point, which starts to slow your plane down. During this phase, you also line up with your runway and have the autopilot follow something called the glide slope down towards the runway using its ILS system. While all of this is going on, you also need to set up the aircraft for landing with things like flaps and the other stopping systems. Landing. You disconnect the autopilot at a few hundred feet and fly the plane the rest of the way to the runway. Once you're quite literally tens of feet off the ground, you do something called a flare. This flare is so the plane can have a smooth landing so the passengers don't experience 10 Gs of force upon landing. And finally, taxi to a gate. So, now that we're all caught up here, here's some things I couldn't really fit into that summary. In order to follow the altitude restrictions, you must put the aircraft into managed climb or descent mode, as opposed to open descent, so the plane actually follows the flight restrictions. I theorize this is a big player in what caused my funked up flight in the first place. You can calculate takeoff speeds and other performance related things with the onboard fly pad found inside the fly-by-wire A320neo. You can change the waypoint you're flying towards by using the direct page on the flight management computer. And finally, during the whole flight, different lights will come on and off depending on the situation. However, this is something I admittedly still struggle with to this day, and I've done the flight by this point. So, I've learned nearly everything I could ever need about my aircraft and the whole flight operation in general. But it's kind of useless if I can't practice it. Luckily, during my learning period, I also discovered something called a traffic pattern, which is basically when you take off from one runway, turn and fly parallel to the airport, and then turn again to land back on that same runway. It's simple, but can help you master some of the basics on each integral part of flight. So, I did those mix in with some full flights of a random route in between the airports I wanted to go to once I felt more comfortable flying. Wait, where do I want to fly? While thinking of airports to fly to, I used a thing called VATtastic to kind of give me an idea of how many flights certain airports have to deal with. Some are a lot, but some seem more manageable. As a new player, I probably want 2 airports that aren't too heavy on traffic, but have enough to keep it interesting and also have a chance of air traffic control being online. I'll talk about ATC in a little bit, by the way. So with that, I just picked 2 that looked relatively friendly and weren't too far apart. In the end, I ended up with Dallas Love Field and Memphis International Airport. Okay, small issue avoided. Let's continue with the practice now. So, as you can see, I've come quite a long way from, but just knowing to fly a plane isn't enough for VATSIM. You also have to know how to talk to air traffic control, and lucky me, there was a forum post that quite literally detailed everything I could ever need, what each control section did, and what to say to them. Do you see each of these sections? Each has a very specific thing they're supposed to do, and the way most interactions go is that you either request something, they give you information instructions on what to do based on the request, and then you respond by repeating what they said to you so they know you were listening, and then you do the thing. Or they'll just straight up tell you to do something, and you just have to respond by repeating what they said to you and doing the thing they told you to do. Do keep in mind, however, whatever they say goes. Regardless of whatever altitude restrictions you might have on your flight plan, you go to whatever altitude they say. Now, there really is no way to practice or explain this any further, at least in my mind, because a majority of air traffic communications are ones where you have to be ready for something different every time, making it harder to practice and explain it without actually interacting with other people. But the next best thing is to practice switching to different frequencies and saying clearances out loud to try memorizing them, which ended up sounding like this. Love field. It helped, but after just a few of these types of practice runs, I guess, I grew tired and realized I was at a roadblock and just had to make the next big step. And that step was to do a full flight with air traffic control. So now that I had decided that, I just had to wait for ATC to come online at either airport. Oh yeah. Also, I admittedly forgot to record audio for the first part of the air traffic control communications because of how fast I set things up. So you won't hear about the first half of communications I had with them. My bad. Love Field Center, hello, American 718, Airbus A320 Neo Gate 4 with ATIS information Alpha, QNH 2999, requesting IFR clearance to Memphis. American 718, ready for taxi. 7118, American 7118.
American 718 Memphis centered offline, frequency change approved.
Frequency change approved, monitor Unicom on 122.8. Goodbye. Thank you for your patience.
American 718, wind 070 at 8 gusting 15 knots, runway 18X, clear to land.
Clear to land, runway 18